You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 8, Jomo. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you today? I hope you had a lovely week. Did you learn anything last week about progesterone? Did I convince you to love it? Do you remember the two things you know better than most medical practitioners now? If I may, hop back up on my soapbox for just a second. Remember that progestins are not progesterone, and you still need progesterone even if you've had a hysterectomy. Whew. Okay, back off the soapbox. Thank you. I am grateful to get to spend a few minutes with you, and I hope you're doing something fun while you listen. I'm going to start out today reminiscing about August 21st, 2017. It was almost exactly 4 years ago, and I wouldn't have remembered that particular date had I not looked it up to write this episode. But I do remember that day very clearly. Depending on where you live, maybe you do too. It was the day that a total solar eclipse passed diagonally over the entire United States. I remember we had these special cardboard glasses. I don't even remember where we got them from. And I was thinking about the eclipse a little bit ahead of time and thought that since the sun would be about 95% eclipsed in our hometown, that would be just as awesome as being in the zone of totality. Then I read an article somewhere on the internet, I don't know who wrote it, but I'm very thankful to them, about how if you're close, you need to do everything you can to get into the zone of totality because 95% is not the same experience as 100%. So just a day or two before the eclipse, I changed my mind and decided that my new plan for that day was to excuse my kids from school, put them in the car in the morning, and drive 3 hours to Idaho to be in the zone of totality by 11:30 a.m. or whatever time it was. That internet guy was totally right. It was way more educational than being in class. The experience was indescribable. It was amazing and beautiful and filled me with a sense of awe, which I love. It was just so cool. The drive home, which took 3 times as long, 9.5 hours instead of 3, was not so cool. But I was on an eclipse high, so it was okay, and still totally worth it. Have you ever experienced a total solar eclipse? If so, keep in mind that feeling and image of the sun being blacked out by the moon, but still having that little ring of light behind it. Think of it as the black sun, because we're going to come back to that in a minute. If you're a planning nerd and a science nerd like I am, be advised that the next solar eclipse in the US will be on April 8th, 2024. You might start thinking about your plans for that day now. I have been. I plan to travel east to see it in totality. Now we're going to get on topic and talk about Jomo. Have you heard of Jomo? I'm sure you're more hip than I am, so you probably have, but it's a term that I only heard recently, and I really like it. Just so we're on the same page, Jomo is a variation on the term FOMO. As you know, FOMO stands for the fear of missing out. It was a term invented by author Patrick J. McGinnis in an article he wrote in 2004. I have found that FOMO is actually in the dictionary, and that the definition is a little different depending on whether you go with Oxford, Merriam-Webster, the Urban Dictionary, or Wikipedia. Basically, a summary of all of them is that FOMO is an anxiety created by the thought that something enjoyable might be going on for others while the person feeling the anxiety is not present. Some other definitions include that it's a fear of regret for missing an opportunity or a fear that not participating is the wrong choice. We've all heard of people experiencing FOMO about new tech toys, vacations, parties, even knowing what's in the news. Some people can't handle not knowing the latest headlines. I live in oblivion, and I kind of like it that way. Where I live, there's a new fast food place called Raising Cane's. Have you heard of this? Do you have one of these near you? They must be experts at creating FOMO because there are always lines of cars for miles waiting to try this place. They have to have police directing traffic into their drive-thru like it's a Post Malone concert or something. I tell you, I don't get it, but there are some people with some serious chicken finger FOMO. Which brings us to Jomo, the joy of missing out. It's also in the dictionary with slightly different definitions depending on which dictionary you choose. My favorite for this one is the Urban Dictionary, which says Jomo is, quote, a strange kind of emotional release when you realize you've been left out. Anyway, it's a pleasure you get from not caring what other people are doing or saying, which is kind of awesome, don't you think? I think we could all use a little more Jomo in our lives. Of course, there are things we'd all love to miss out on, like chronic pain, fatigue, cardiovascular disease, cancer, frailty, and feeling like life passed us by. But are we able to have Jomo for the things that contribute to what we want to have Jomo for? Am I making sense here? Is it possible to truly enjoy missing out on birthday cake with the family, chips at the barbecue, donuts at the early morning meeting, gossip about the new neighbor, stress over a work deadline, the newest show on Amazon Prime, or a great online deal? I think so. What do you think? What do you think your life would be like if you genuinely looked forward to opportunities to miss out on your favorite kryptonites? We live in a culture of self-indulgence. It's everywhere around us, in advertisements and what's considered a normal way to live. We've all been conditioned to believe that it's absolutely intolerable to be denied something that we want. But what if we could learn to tolerate or even enjoy some deprivation? How in the world would we do that? Experiencing deprivation is the first step toward being able to tolerate it. First steps are good. If we can desire something and not give in to that desire, that's a good thing, and better than what most people are able to do. That's white-knuckling it. We're restrained, but empty inside. We learn to tolerate it. But what if we could go beyond tolerance to enjoyment? There's a book called Coming Alive by Barry Michaels and Phil Stutz. I heard about it from my Optimize Coach program founder, Brian Johnson, because his coach, whom he talks about all the time, is Phil Stutz. I even got to be on a live call with Phil a couple of weeks ago, which was pretty cool because he usually only works with Academy Award-winning actors and high-level CEOs and stuff. Phil invented several techniques he calls the tools. I'll put a link to the books in the show notes if you want to learn more. One of the tools in the book, Coming Alive, is a way to deal with urges or impulses for self-indulgent things that prevent us from becoming the best versions of ourselves. Get the book if you want a full explanation of exactly how to use this tool to change your life, but here are the basics. When you have an urge or an impulse, you notice it and allow it to be there. You imagine that you're completely barred from having this thing that you so desire. Let's call it a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup milkshake because that sounds really good to me right now. You imagine you absolutely cannot have this thing, intensifying your desire for it. And then you imagine that you can't have anything at all that the world has to offer you. The entire world is closed off to you. First, you let go of the thing you want so much. Then you let go of the outside world altogether, renouncing hope that anything in it will ever fill you up. Then you slowly turn away from the world and look inward, into the void you are trying to fill with this thing that you want so badly. You look into the nothingness there and patiently wait. You embrace the emptiness that comes from the disappointment of denial. Eventually, that nothingness becomes a somethingness. There's something in there after all. Far from being empty, the void inside you is a space of infinite abundance. And from that abundance, you can contribute to the world in a meaningful way. So the steps of the tool are feeling deprivation, then emptiness, then fullness, and then giving. And the name of this tool is the Black Sun. The Black Sun as a tool is like the totality of a solar eclipse, which is beautiful and amazing. The Black Sun helps you realize that you have unwittingly obscured the sun that's inside you by trying to fulfill your needs with things from the outside world. So this tool, the black sun, involves giving up the outside world as a source of fulfillment and turning inward to the sun that's already inside of you. Instead of desiring to pull something in, you get true fulfillment by putting something out. The more you give, the more you're filled up. When we have an intense desire for something and we really don't want to miss out on it, we might be in an altered state that blinds us to the consequences of our actions. In order to get out of that altered state, you have to realize when you're in it and then do something about it in the moment. That's what this tool is made for. You oftentimes can't think your way out of FOMO because we're all good at rationalizing that just this one little thing, just this one little time doesn't matter in the overall scheme of things. So this tool gives you something to do as soon as you feel an urge. Start with small little temptations and see how it goes. You don't need to believe me or Phil Stutz, who made it up. It's something you need to experience for yourself. When you neutrally and patiently stare into the inner abyss, the entire outside world disappears as a source of gratification for you. Gaining control over the small little things is where the magic happens. Do you remember when I told you that the sublime comes through the mundane? It's still true. When we give in to our little excuses about small things, we participate in our own self-destruction. Little things seem harmless, but create something much more dangerous. A self-indulgent way of life. The cost of this lifestyle is your future. To quote from the book Coming Alive, quote, "Whatever you want to create in the future requires that you delay gratification in the present. Self-indulgence exhausts the energy you need to get what you want out of life. It drains you drip by drip so you aren't even aware anything is happening, until finally you pay the ultimate price. It's too late to accomplish what you wanted to in your life." End quote. The little things do matter, and your ability to find joy in missing out on impulses that don't serve your higher purpose or create better health for your future body can set you free. There's something to be said for being able to tolerate disappointment, because you'll be disappointed either way, either now because you don't get to have a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup shake, or later because you had a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup shake when you swore you wouldn't and it wasn't on your plan and now it's creating harmful effects in your body. But let's go beyond tolerance. The joy part of the joy of missing out comes not from denial or punishment or even the ability to tolerate disappointment, white knuckle style, but in transmuting the feeling of emptiness into a sense of inner fullness that radiates out into the world. Can you feel it? Can you see the black sun? I just noticed that my computer has 2 buttons on the top right side of the keyboard that look like a black sun or a solar eclipse, and they make me happy. They're to adjust the screen brightness, but I think they'll serve as a good reminder to me. The tool of the black sun can also be used when slipping into fantasizing about kryptonite behavior, or after giving into a temptation and thinking about how to do it better next time. No need to beat yourself up. Just use the black sun to think about what you might do differently next time the temptation comes up. To quote a little more from the book, quote, "Don't waste your life force on petty impulses that excite you in the short run but drain your life force in the long run. When you restrain an impulse, the energy doesn't just disappear, it changes its nature. When you indulge in the impulse, the energy flows out of you, leaving you with less than you started with. When you resist an impulse, the energy goes back into you and then eventually makes its way out into the world and increases by giving itself away. Giving energy is the only thing that can fill you up. It's about much more than you. It's about transforming lower, greedy energy into higher, giving energy. There is a sublime sense of excitement and accomplishment that comes with mastering this alchemy of transforming negative into positive energy." End quote. Isn't that good? Can you find the joy in missing out when missing out alchemizes negative, greedy energy into positive, giving energy and radiates out from you to increase your contribution to the world and your confidence in yourself? When attempting to predict success in anything, willpower outpredicts IQ by a factor of 2, and willpower can be trained in an enjoyable and non-overwhelming way. It starts with tiny little choices. There's even research that shows that tiny, regular wins provide more satisfaction than big ones. Here's one more quote from the book Coming Alive about self-mastery and why it is the way to create self-confidence. Quote, "It doesn't seem like self-restraint would increase your confidence, but it does. Think about it for a moment. What would your life be like if you gave in to every urge that came into your head? You'd be living on shaky ground, knowing your life could fall off the rails at any moment. You wouldn't be able to rely on commitments you've made to yourself. It would destroy your confidence in yourself. In contrast, when you can restrain yourself, you, instead of your urges, are in the driver's seat. You control your choices. This gives you a sense of confidence that the most important things in your life aren't going to be sacrificed on a whim or because an urge suddenly seizes hold of you." End quote. Of course, I'm not talking about becoming a sadist or a self-flagellator or a monk, unless you really want to. If you planned to have birthday cake with your family, chips at the barbecue, and to watch the new show on Amazon Prime, go ahead and do it. You know what brings you true joy. You also know your own personal kryptonites that call to you but ultimately make your life worse. That's what I'm talking about here. If we can use these temptations as opportunities to instead become better people, we'll have so much more joy. The joy of missing out and the joy of living up to our potential and of bringing something to the world rather than trying to extract something from it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Next week, we're going to talk about the wonders of nitric oxide. It's not from your dentist. Until then, don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.